Today on Guest of the Week, we have a seasoned and experienced personality in entrepreneurship, finance, business, and etc. An associate professor and MD CEO of Precise Financial Systems Limited, Dr. Yele. He talks to us on what technology is in Nigeria, what it should be, and how to get it to where it ought to be. Enjoy the conversation. Good to have you on the show today.
Always a pleasure.
We understand that you, judging from your experience and the time you've been in this industry, you have watched this industry grow from scratch to what it is today. How would you assess ICT development in Nigeria?
I wouldn't say I've watched it grow from scratch, because when I came into the industry, I mean, I'm only about 30-something years old in this industry, you know. We met seniors in the industry as well, and some of them are still alive. I mean, and every time I say I pay tributes to people like Sir Aladekomo. I started business because of Sir Aladekomo, because I liked his charisma, I liked his honesty. I saw a honest person and somebody cerebral and yet very simple, and he was doing well. And I thought I wanted to be like that. And of course, there were people like the Chief Odegbamis who were already in business. The Donetiebets were already in business before us. And, you know, even the Shane Williamses of Tara were already in software business before us. Simeon Agu had started a business, CSA, at that time, when we came in. All right. But incidentally, we came in at interesting times, or during interesting times, if I may say. Why do I say so? We came in at a time when the PC became much more ubiquitous. And with the advent of the PC, computing got closer to people. Then remember that the banking industry played a very big role in catalyst, when you look at a catalyst role that the banking industry played for development of software in Nigeria. And of course, so if you take a look at it, the banking industry set the stage for fintech. And I am glad to say companies like mine and John Obaro System Specs, who have taken lead in creating foundation for the fine incumbent players that we see today, the InterSwitches, the Paystacks, and the Pagas of this world, who have taken a very good taking, you know, the industry to the next levels. It's quite interesting to see the evolution of what's going on, particularly in at least proving something that Africans, Nigerians, I like to be specific to Nigerians, that Nigerians can actually create smart intellectual property that can be consumed and that actually work and are reliable, world class. That's interesting enough for me. Of course, there are other challenges associated with some of these things, but that notion is the foundation of everything, because when you have a population of people who do not even have capacity to create intellectual property, then you are really running into trouble. But more than anything, we are convinced that Nigerians have capacity to create intellectual property that is world class and can compete. Excellent beginning, and I hope we can sustain it.
Okay, what about the policies, the regulation, and everything? Are we on the right path?
Now, those are where we have to do a whole lot of work. So like I said, look, if you take a look at the poverty and prosperity of nations, you would appreciate that indeed poverty and prosperity of nations have very, very little to do with abundance of resources. Of course, for those who are scholars, there's a theory called resource-based theory that tends to say organizations, and of course, as a follow-up, nations that have more resources are more likely to do better than those that do not have. But we can actually see that if you take a look at what goes on, even with the commodity prices all over the world, so you have countries that have cocoa like Nigeria, even crude. Where is the price of crude determined? Price of crude, price of cocoa, price of coffee, price of maize, you know, they are determined in London. You don't control those. So for nations that are going to tap into the wealth of nations, need to realize that there's a whole lot more to do than just having those resources. And that's one of the challenges we have right now in Nigeria, because in a way, we are also positioning Nigeria, bringing entrepreneurs forward as though they are primary resources, and I'm very concerned about that. Because ordinarily speaking, as an economist, I mean, as a graduate of economics, entrepreneurship is supposed to be at the apex of the factors of production. But in a way, we are now making the tail wag the dog by bringing entrepreneurs forward as if they are in the lower rungs of the production value chain. And there's a whole lot that must happen at policy level and at government levels if we are going to escape what I call the hypnotic entrapment of slavery.
We would like you to elaborate more on that hypnotic
entrapment of slavery. Yeah, I mean, I use, please, I'm not trying to speak big grammar. I use that they are very hypnotic, is like hypnotizing. And it's hypnotizing because what hypnotism does is make you believe something that's not real, that's not correct. So you see, even for people who are supposed to know, they come and sell concepts to us in this country today. Oh, that it doesn't really matter that all the funding is coming from outside this country. It's a good thing. That's hypnotism, because that's not the reality. Why didn't America allow the Chinese to buy up all their firms? Why don't the Chinese allow the Koreans or the Japanese to buy up all their firms, if that is correct? But even people who should be at the vanguard of defending certain things sing the same songs. Oh no, it doesn't matter. That's not, and it's entrapping us. Because so what you see today is that actually, contrary to what we would have loved to see, we are seeing very many companies that are doing very well, who have very little or no stakes indigenously. And that's why I say it's a hypnotic entrapment, and it's virtually going to enslave us. I've said this several times. And all we really need to do is just a little tweak. So because what's going on is, these are our people. All the guys we're talking about, they're all our people. They're Nigerians. They are, human beings. Like, they went to the same schools that, most Nigerians went. They toiled on the soil of this country. So, had Nigeria done certain things, perhaps those businesses will still be those businesses, still provided. The services are provided to who? To Nigerians. The market is here. But where does the capital gain go? At the end of the year. So you have the capital flowing outside of the country. Something has to happen. And the reason why that's happening is that, hey, he who pays the piper dictates the tune. They are the owners. Because they bought the stocks. So those are things that I think need to change. We need to allow those investments to be internalized as much as possible. After all, we have the market, we have the skill, we have the people. So what do we need? An appropriate value system, an appropriate narrative, enabling policies, and actual intervention sometimes to ensure that Nigerians are empowered to be the owners of these businesses. And not only that, so it means that we can actually create businesses here that can compete globally. And we are very open to partnerships. I mean, absolutely, we are not saying we want to play as an island. That's going to be wrong. We want to have partners. We want to work with all the nations of the world, wherever they are, Canada, the United States, the UK, the Germany, China, all of them. But we want to work with them on terms that are not lopsided. So what then happens is that if we do not do that, and we haven't done that enough, so you see that in the abundance of water, the fool remains thirsty. So you see a lot of beautiful, lovely companies paying a whole lot of royalty and a whole lot of what you call management agreements to foreign countries. We can do without all those if we have appropriate policies in place.
Yes, talking about how to leverage the gap to local content and how well our local content programmers are doing?
Yes, so I mean, one of the things we know is that today Nigerians have created software that's competing with, you know, software being brought in by, you know, so-called global players, and they are doing extremely well. And I've mentioned examples, but I think beyond those policies, I use the word value. And when you look at value, it's an encapsulation of a lot of things. And one of the things that value does is, first of all, we have to determine what is the identity of what you call the Nigerian. And we need to be very clear about that. So if you see an American, for example, you see, generally speaking, they are gregarious people, even when they know nothing. A whole lot of them absolutely know nothing. But you see them, they are the loudest in class. But now they say we are Americans. What determines what the Nigerian is? Today we don't have that, and that's one of the reasons why you see IPOB will say their own, Udua will say their own, Mietiala, Arewa will say their own, because we do not have an identity. That's a Nigerian, and it's not difficult to do that. Now, around identities, where you see any organization or any group of human beings that have a strong sense of identity, they are actually very indivisible. But let me tell you how identities come by. Identities are also a function of storylines and narratives. And that's what people call legends. That's what we haven't done properly. So the issues around here is, when you say the Nigerian, what comes to your mind? That's the meaning of a brand. A brand is not about how much of show, how much of television, how much of newspaper advertisements that you have done. A brand is the emotions that the thought of your name or your brand exudes in other people. But if you take a look today and you say the Nigerian, majority of the people will think 419. That's what they think.
Absolutely.
Why? Because that's the, but how many people actually do 419 in Nigeria? You'll be very surprised that these are few people. But the fact is that that narrative will remain what is incumbent until we tell our narratives. And that's the adage that we say, an African proverb that's clear, that says that all the stories about hunting will glorify and gratify the hunters until lions tell their own stories. Hunters will come and tell you, oh, it was a tough one. I did this. Do you know how many the lions ate? So the issues are, we as a people, we are not telling our success stories. And trust me, we have so many success stories. Those success stories need to be, and you have a lot of work to do about that, the press, the media. They need to be curated. They need to be amplified. I mean, for God's sake, why should CNN be the one to tell me about Africa changemakers? Who is CNN to tell me about Africa changemakers? But you have to understand something, the power of the media. Anybody that has access to the power of the media can influence the generality of the people. And this is the truth. You have to understand that it's human nature. Look, nature is very interesting. Less than 1% of people are able to think and reason out the real meat and logic. Majority of the people that you are ever going to see are going to trust what they hear other people saying, particularly when it's the media. Even when the person talking is dumb, but once it's on the television, majority of people tend to trust. And that's why we haven't done that. We are then outsourcing to CNN. Do you think it is in the interest of the United States for you to become another China? They know they are contending with China. And then you think that they're going to make sure that the narratives suit you? I think we are just joking. We really need to understand this and decide, and this comes from the very top, determine actually who is the Nigerian. And when we determine who the ideal Nigerian is, we identify a few of them. These countries have done this. You have, even China had their Jack Ma until recently. They had Alibaba. You get my point? Then America has that, Bill Gates. Now the poster boys are the Zuckerbergs. Who are the poster boys in Nigeria? You identify such people, and we begin to create narratives around these things, so that these narratives begin, you see what we call, they have a snowballing effect. it goes down. And so when you are able to replicate and you are able to create 200,000 success stories, and you are the one saying it, then nobody is going to be able to controvert. Then, at that point, perhaps you have a right to challenge the wrong myths about yourselves. And that's what we are not doing enough of. So what then happens today is, when even a company like PFS, even PFS, which is supposed to be like, PFS, we actually go compete sometimes, and you still see, some people, ignorant actually, who say, oh, well, it's a local software. What does that mean? The people that develop web, the people in PFS went to Harvard, they went to all the best schools in the world. Then you still say, and that again is because of the narrative. And by the way, I say Harvard. Why Harvard? I went to IFE. When I went to IFE, by the time I graduated from IFE, anybody that graduated from IFE was equivalent to anybody from Harvard or MIT. What changed? So today, I saw something that said some European nations don't even want to recognize our degrees anymore. What changed? These are power of narratives. Now let me tell you one thing. The Americans have mastered it. Call it whatever you like, call it propaganda, it works. Americans will sell you an empty shell, collect your money and use it to develop it. It works. But what do we do? So what then happens is that rather than people even trusting in our own brothers and sisters, because they haven't heard sufficiently saturating narratives to have cause to believe that their brothers can do it, they would rather allow a foreigner to do it. And that's why we are where we are. And that's a real challenge. And what I would call the tragedy of poverty in Africa and in Nigeria.
One key area that we must focus on if we are to move forward is education.
Correct.
You have seen it all like that.
I don't think so.
As in, having the experience here in Nigeria, in many top universities around the world, in other parts of Africa.
Correct.
You have seen how this is done elsewhere.
Correct.
What needs to be done in Nigeria to get our education structure well packaged?
So, bottom line about education, two things are important. One is, are we still having the kind of education where we just go to class here and then the test is about regurgitating? That's a real challenge. What we need to do is have education that produces results. And this way to make this happen, and I've done, and these are things that my company is actually doing. We are now signing MOUs with universities. And the MOUs give three things. One, we allow some of their professors to observe our board proceedings, observe our management meetings. Two, it allows some of our own senior staff as adjunct lecturers, so that we actually can teach the students what industry is asking for. See, it's a different ballgame. So they can understand that, okay, why your professors are asking you to understand this is because when you come out, this is what you are likely to do. So when people learn from that standpoint, they tend to internalize it better, and they tend to understand it a lot more, and they are happy to go. And that's why if you go to countries like the United States, then you hear something like Bill Gates is a dropout. So, no, they are not the kind of dropouts we are talking about. What actually happens is that because they have that kind of collaboration, that's what happens in America. So a lot of their professors are on boards of companies. So they know what the companies want, and they come back to college to try to do those things. So that's why hackathons are happening every day in small colleges. You understand? So by the time 2-3 bright students, they are probably in year 2. So 4 more years in the US. They already got the idea. How much knowledge do you really need to be successful in life? At that point, they said, listen, this is good enough. They are running, it becomes an enterprise. And then you say they dropped out. They didn't drop out in that sense. True, they dropped out before completing college, but they have adequate knowledge to pursue something that creates value. That is important. And then most importantly, for education, We need to understand that if this country will ever go anywhere, it's no longer the days of extractive prosperity, where money is coming out of the ground. We need to smell the coffee. The cheese has moved. The richest countries today are countries that have high human capital indexes. And what do we still do here? We still disparage professors, people who have knowledge, because they cannot show cash. We still celebrate. We need to understand that we need to begin to celebrate knowledge. We need to begin to appreciate knowledge, and we need to begin to develop knowledge. And not only knowledge for the sake of knowing it in your head, knowledge that becomes kinetic, that creates new things. Look, if we do this, issues of funding of universities will fall in place by themselves. The reason why people are talking about funding of universities is because you cannot be putting money into a bottomless pit. What results are you getting in the enterprise? But when the market is the one funding the school, you will see what will happen.
This is Digivation Network.
All right, that's all we can take on the show for this week. You can contact us on www.youtube.com/Digivation Network and our social media platforms displayed on your screens. On behalf of the regular anchor Byra Gabi, thanks for watching. I am Gideon Tobiloba. Join us again next week for another interesting package. Bye for now.